Maggie Epps. I work for AGH Strategies as a CRM developer. And what that means is we work with nonprofits who are implementing Civic CRM, an open source software, and I help them to customize it, debug it, and basically implement it for however best suits their needs. I became a social worker because my senior year of college, I happened into a class that was a service learning class, and basically you were taking a class and then you were volunteering on the side, and I started volunteering with an adult ed center that basically taught all sorts of GED type preparation classes and basic reading and English to ex-offenders. The way that I decided to be a coder, and if you can call it a decision, was I couldn't sleep one night and I was on my iPad browsing Facebook, and somebody had posted a link to an article about App Academy. At the time, I don't know if they still do this, but App Academy had a deal where if you went there and you didn't pay any tuition unless you found a job. And I thought, how cool, because I'd been a social worker for the last few years and really wanted to get a job where I used math in some way. And I was like, oh, I could go get trained in something without having to, put up front a lot of money. So I filled out the application that night at 1 in the morning and woke up the next morning to a coding challenge in my email inbox. And that was sort of what started things. I never went to App Academy, but I just started teaching myself to code because I said, oh, I'll just see if I like it enough to do this coding challenge. If I get in, I'll just see what happens. And I liked it so much that I just wound up looking at other programs and found a different one. I chose Coding Dojo. Some of it was just circumstantial. I was in a job where I was getting burned out and I was ready to leave, and Coding Dojo had a start time that was really, worked out well with my schedule. But what also happened was I had not made up my mind that this is what I wanted to do. I had sort of was like, well, maybe I'll just keep teaching myself on the side, or, maybe I'll do something else. And but I looked at Coding Dojo and I really liked their website. There was just something, I liked the feeling that their website had. It was sort of, they painted themselves a little more relaxed than some of the other programs, a little more about self-motivation. I really like Ruby, but I think some of that is that it was the first language I learned, and so it's feels like home for me in some ways. It sort of reminds me of that night when I first started teaching myself to code. I also just think it has a lot of functionality that PHP and JavaScript don't. But I also really like PHP because it was what helped me learn coding the best. I like Ruby, but trying to learn Ruby with no coding experience was really challenging. And then going back and learning PHP and then switching back to Ruby actually helped me understand Ruby a lot better, because Ruby's structure is so special, but all of the training materials about Ruby will tell you that it's special, but they'll tell you that it's special in ways that assume that you understand other languages, whereas PHP is really structured and you just can see what's happening as you write the code. I had planned to kind of start reaching out to people, start making connections, and I was on the DC Tech Jobs Facebook page, which is a great page, highly recommend it. And I saw a posting from somebody where I read the job description. I was like, oh, this actually kind of describes me if I just knew how to code, which I will in a couple months. And they were looking for somebody like a little who was still learning to some degree, but they also were looking for somebody with nonprofit experience, with customer service experience, but it was for a developer. So I didn't apply to that job, but I Facebook messaged the person who posted it. What I didn't realize was that the person who posted it was actually the head of the company. And I said, hi, this is who I am. I'm just, I'd love to talk to you guys, like thinking that it would lead to me having a contact for when I got back. And he wrote back and said, oh, we'd love to interview you. So I actually had my job interview the first week I was in the program. If there's something to be learned from it, for me, it was targeting a place where I could see that the expertise I already had was actually applicable to the work they were doing. And I think that they really valued that, and that was really helpful to me. What I would say now in my current job is that I sort of consider myself in a hybrid social work developer role, because I spend my days working with nonprofits, providing a lot of support to them, training people on how to use our software, but then I get to go back and do the coding as well. No, I really like having work where you can just sort of be quiet and put on your headphones and just like accomplish something. I find that to be a lot of fun at my old job. Um, you couldn't always do that, and it's just nice to lose yourself in your work sometimes. I mean, I think other careers have that, but like it's something I really love about coding. Mostly just my own fears about whether or not I'm actually good enough, and you know, being afraid to admit I don't know something because I think it'll make me look like not an expert, or being terrified when you know, take down a client site because I think like everyone will know that this isn't really what you're meant to do, or like, and I think that's one of the big ones. The other one is, other people, unless you just kind of walk in and say, I know what I'm doing, people will think you don't. And because, you know, whether it's being a woman or whether it's just sort of being that, not everybody knows how to do this. And there are a lot of people who think they know how to do it and don't. And so I think just having to learn how to just walk in, and when I know the answer, like actually act like I know the answer rather than deferring to somebody else. Mostly meetups. I just went to Ruby for Good, which was really great. Um, which was like a weekend of coding and would be great for anybody who's just learning. But also meetups around town. I really like to try to participate in open source projects, and it's a great way to kind of learn and see another way that people write code, even if that code is or isn't right. I go to the DC Rug meetups, and then I run my own meetup, which is actually really helpful to me. It's we get mostly beginners, but it's really nice for me to talk to people who are just starting out, because it helps me realize what I have learned and what I still have to learn. I think for me, finding, when I first started out, I got really lucky. I went to Rails Girls, which is another great group. And I found a couple girls who had sort of done something really similar to what I was doing, and they made my experience a lot better. And what I did was, as soon as I kind of, one of them I met through somebody else who said, oh, I know somebody who did something just like what you're doing. And so I immediately emailed her and said, let's get drinks. And then another girl I just met at a Rails Girls meetup, and I immediately said, can we email? And, made sure I reached out and said, like, let's get coffee. And those two experiences were really helpful because they were able to say, like, this is what it's like being a newer person in this field. These are some things I really wish I'd known. In the community at large, I would say most people are really helpful, but you have to know how to go up and approach people. There, some of the meetups, people will be more friendly, especially like Rails Girls, or I hope mine, we try. Okay. But at the bigger ones, you really have to be a little more proactive. And I know I go and I get a little intimidated, and then I just have to like find my setting where I can talk to people and figure out what questions I have, and also just listen. Like, I find that, like, even if I don't think the person is saying something that is helpful to me, it might come up later that I realize, like, oh, they did say something that is good for me to know. Sometimes, just listening to other people having tech conversations that feel over your head will teach you language that you won't even think about it at the time, but later it'll come back to you. Ask yourself why you're doing it. I think if you're doing it because you really like coding, then I think that's a really good reason to do it. Meet people, whether it's going to meetups, whether it's just sort of whoever you can talk to in the field, talk to them, because you'll learn so much more. You have to figure out what your learning style is, and I knew that I like to have enough structure that I get stuff done, but I also like to be on my own. So that worked really well for me. But if you're somebody who needs a lot of structure, my program wouldn't have been as good. If you're somebody who is really independent, it also might not have been as good. Like, it was a good mix for me. I think, a lot of the other programs offer other things that are really good for the right person.